Okay, welcome everyone. We're gonna just wait one more minute while we let a few more people into the meeting. We had a big group of registrants today, so we'll be ready to start in just a minute. All right, let's get started. Welcome. I'm Hillary Fry. I'm the executive editor of HuffPost, and I'm very excited to be here today as the host for this exciting event after our first presidential debate of the 2020 season here. We've got with us today Amanda Turkle, our Washington, D.C. bureau chief, as well as reporters Tara Golshan and Igor Bobik on our politics team. And they're going to break down everything that happened last night. I'm sure folks have lots of questions too, which we'll get to. So I just want to run through a few details of how this will run today, and then I'll hand it over to Amanda. First, we want to make this as interactive as possible. So if you're comfortable turning on your video, please do. We love to see you and we want to see you. So if you can, go ahead and start your video. You'll find that feature at the bottom left of your screen. We also want to hear from you. So in about a half an hour, we'll get to Q&A. We'd love to take live questions. So if you have a question that you'd like to ask our panel, all you'll have to do is raise your virtual hand in Zoom. You can also wave to us, but we may not see you. So there is a function here in Zoom. You can click participants at the bottom of your screen, and you'll see a panel open up on the right that says raise hand. So if you can do that in your browser. If you're on a mobile device, you click the more button at the bottom right and select raise hand. We'll try our best to get to everyone's questions. We'll see how many people have questions, but I will be calling you up. So if you raise your hand, I'll say your name out loud. I will unmute you and ask you to share your question with our panel. If you have any technical questions, concerns about how things are working, muting, unmuting, if you have any kind of issues there, you can also chat one of our moderators who have pink and green backgrounds. You can chat them by selecting their name in the chat, and the chat functions at the bottom of your screen. And before we get started, one last thing. If you would like to support HuffPost journalism, and I know you do, support the important work these guys are doing every day, and the rest of our journalists, think about joining HuffPost with a paid membership. You'll get access to our comments section, invitations to virtual events like this one, and more. All you have to do is go to huffpost.com/subscribe. So now I'm going to hand it over to Amanda, Igor, and Tara.
Hi, thank you all for being here today. We love doing these and talking to you guys, and we have obviously a lot to talk about today. So first of all, you may know if you've done these before, but we like to have poll questions pop up during the chat. And so the first poll is going to come up now, and then we will share the answers when it comes out, when everyone's done doing it. And so this poll is, was this the worst presidential debate you've ever seen? Yes or no? Or I didn't watch it. So I wanted to start off with Tara and Igor. If you visited HuffPost last night or this morning, their story was the top story on the site, what we call the splash. And they, Tara and Igor, I want to hear from you on whether you thought this was the worst debate. I will say that from an editor's perspective, we found this one of the hardest debates to cover because it was so different. If you turned on CNN, which is usually pretty milquetoast, even they were saying that they just couldn't believe how bad it was, what a shit show it was, how it was a complete disaster. But one thing we wanted to be careful of at HuffPost was not to just say it was a disaster and that was the fault of Trump, Biden, and Chris Wallace all talking over each other. We felt like the blame did lay more with Trump and sort of how he was conducting himself during the debate. But anyway, I'll let Igor and Tara talk more. And I want to hear from you guys. I'll start with Tara. So was this the worst debate you've ever seen? Why? And sort of what were your thoughts on it from last night?
I think I woke up this morning still a little bit in shock at what we'd watched last night, just because he started with the moderator kind of laying out the ground rules, and right off the bat, it just unraveled really quickly because it became apparent that Trump, who has kind of repeated this style over his last 4 years, is not interested in playing on any kind of ground rules that are set. And so that was just upended immediately. There was no order. There was no like a time allowed for Biden to speak and for Trump to then rebut. It was Biden speaking and Trump speaking over him, and then Chris Wallace trying to moderate them in some way. Within 10 minutes of the debate, Biden told Trump to shut up. So that was kind of a good example of how that set the tone for the evening. And I think in some ways it was effective. Trump was effective in his style. Like that is, I think, what his base likes to see from him, that kind of tough bully personality. And he brought that across very well. And Biden had to kind of figure out how to react to that in real time. And I think that's why it was just so difficult to watch and one of the worst debates I have seen.
And so, Tara, do you think that, a lot of people were disgusted by Trump's performance, but do you think his base will be energized by this, or do you think they might have been thought he did a poor job as well?
I think when you look at, obviously exit polls from debates you have to take them with a grain of salt, but I think something that rings true is that the vast majority of people watching had already picked their candidate and were just wanting to see how their candidate would perform. And I think if you're a Trump supporter, nothing that happened last night was out of the ordinary. He acted in the way that he has acted this entire time, and he did that in full force. So whether or not that energizes you or does, I don't think it caught anybody by surprise if they're his supporters.
Igor, was this the worst debate you've ever seen, and what were your thoughts?
Absolutely, it was. And I'm looking at the poll results, which aren't done yet. I see there's 2 people who still didn't watch it, and I'm I'm stunned at how that can be, just given how bad it was. I think I still have PTSD, actually. I wanted to take a shower after it was done. There was like not enough alcohol in the world to get past it. I think actually, and Tara and I touched on this in our story last night, that the debate was kind of a perfect distillation of Trump as a person and his presidency as a whole, and what he's been doing in Washington and kind of breaking all these unwritten rules, traditions, bullying people into submission. And it was very traditionally Trump. I actually got a text halfway through the debate from a friend who's not very attuned to politics, commenting that this debate might actually want to make me vote for Kanye West. And I don't I don't know if how serious that person was being, but I think this is Trump's goal here, which is to turn as many people off and try to tip the balance in his favor, because he is clearly losing. And I think he knows he's clearly losing. And what he needed to do tonight was shake Biden off, do something that would change the trajectory of the race. And I don't think he did it.
So we have the poll results back now. Basically everyone, 95% of you, said it was the worst presidential debate you've ever seen. Only one person said it wasn't. That would be interesting to know which one you felt was worse. And then we had 2 people who said they didn't watch it. And so we are going to do another poll now. And this one is going to be who you thought won the debate. Trump, Biden, nobody, or again, I couldn't bring myself to watch, which I know there will be 2 of you. So Igor, you are on the Hill right now. So Igor, I don't know how many of you have been to the Capitol. He is in a little phone booth where reporters can get privacy to talk on the phone, or I guess do Zoom calls. So Igor, you've been around the Hill today talking to GOP senators. What were their thoughts on the debate?
Yeah, that's right. I'm here. I've been talking to senators all morning, and they're not very happy with Trump's performance. Some of them are more willing to speak out against it than others. But primarily what seems to be the issue is his refusal to condemn white supremacists and militia groups like those we've seen marching in Wisconsin and Oregon. Trump told the moderator, Chris Wallace, that he was willing to do it, but in the end didn't do it. He said, they should stand back and stand by. So he has not corrected that statement yet. And some Republicans say that he should. Tim Scott, the only Black Republican senator, said that he should correct it. A couple other senators said that he should be more clear on how he's talking about white supremacists and extremist groups. So I definitely think that comment is going to need to be addressed by the president. As we've seen in the 2018 midterms, Trump has turned off a lot of suburban voters, a lot of women voters, and he really needs these voters if he's going to win re-election. So I don't think he really did himself any favors with that comment.
Yeah, that's, there's been so much talk about how the debate was just a mess, but I think you're right that comment was pretty shocking. And the more you think about it, the more it's really sunk in. But none of that, Igor, none of these senators are talking about that they're going to support Biden now, right?
Absolutely not. I mean, they're laser focused on confirming another conservative justice, which will tip the balance of the court in their favor. And I think for Republicans, all of this will have been worth it. That's their main goal is, their conservative policy goals, repealing Obamacare, Roe v. Wade, chipping away at Roe v. Wade. And I think no matter how many times Trump says something racist or incendiary, they're willing to sort of shrug their shoulders if at the end of the day they get what they want.
So the poll results are back. None of you said Donald Trump won the debate. And then the rest of you, 62% said Joe Biden won the debate. 36% of you said nobody. And then we had one person this time say that they couldn't bring themselves to watch. So I don't know what happened to the other person who didn't watch in the first poll. So Tara, we've now talked a lot about Trump, but I wanted to get your thoughts on how you think Biden did. What were his strengths and his weaknesses last night?
When Biden was able to get a word in edgewise, his biggest strength was when he just talked directly to the voters. And that was something that the campaign said he was going to try to do throughout the night. And I think those were the most powerful moments for him. I was talking to kind of a casual political observer in Wisconsin after the debate. And she was like, when he mentioned at one point in the debate, Biden asked how many families in America have an empty seat at their kitchen table because of somebody they lost to COVID. And she's like, that was the first time there was kind of a semblance of compassion towards the crisis that is happening right now when it comes to coronavirus. So those moments when he urged people to vote however they feel comfortable, when he spoke directly about kind of the economic struggles that people are going to, when he said, are people in Scranton really feeling better after a Trump administration? I think those were his strongest moments during the debate. Those moments were really kind of marked by Trump's bluster. So how much those kind of got through, I think is up for debate, and we'll see in the weeks ahead. But those were kind of Biden's strong points.
And so Biden, the Trump campaign made clear that Trump himself made clear that he was going to go after Biden's family, particularly Hunter Biden, during the debate, which he did. Tara, how do you think Joe Biden handled that moment?
I think that was another one where he honestly a little bit understated too. And he was like, my son had a drug problem and he was working through it. I think that for a lot of people in America, they probably know somebody who has a drug problem or is going through that with their family. So I think when he tried to flip the script on that, it was effective. And Trump just kept hammering on about it, that we knew that was going to happen, obviously. But I think that was one moment where Biden really kind of managed to get through.
What were your thoughts? And are there any ways that you think Joe Biden could do a better job in the next debate?
I think he definitely had his moments. Another good moment that I thought was his answer on the suburbs. Trump has been trying to accuse him of eliminating the suburbs or somehow doing away with the suburbs. All these racist dog whistles about, ending housing in the suburbs. I think that Biden had a good response, which was that, people in the suburbs care about coronavirus and people who are dying from coronavirus, that this isn't the 1950s anymore, that you can't do this, that the country has changed. So I think that was a really good moment for him, a really good answer. I think looking forward, Biden could definitely be a little bit crisper. Some of his answers, especially in the beginning, he's kind of, tripped over his words. I don't know how much that is due to, the speech impediment that he has since he was a child, versus, how much he needs to really polish his answers. You could clearly see him getting angry, sort of pissed that Trump kept interjecting. That's kind of a danger area for him. If he said something worse, perhaps, then "Will you shut up, man?" That could have played worse, especially among center pundits on CNN.
He did also catch himself when he called the president a clown at one point, and he said, "I'm sorry, person." So I think he's aware of that anger.
So, for those of you who hated the format last night, I hope you're prepared for the next presidential debate, because the format will be the same. So you have that to look forward to. And then the final debate will be a town hall style format. And then obviously the next debate is actually the vice presidential debate. So we're going to do another poll now of whether you think there should be more debates. And would you like to see more presidential debates before November? Yes, please. No, thank you. Or it doesn't matter. Trump did interject a lot. And I saw some people saying that they really wish the moderator, Chris Wallace, could have just shut off the mic of the person who wasn't supposed to be talking. Do you guys think that Chris Wallace could have done something more, or was just, what was he going to do? Just because, if Trump isn't going to follow the rules and is going to be a bully, there's little you can do. What do you think of Wallace's performance last night?
I've really struggled with this question. I really just don't know the answer. I've been thinking about it all morning, of what a moderator can do in this situation. I mean, there were moments where maybe it was the framing of the question that kind of sparked Trump, but I thought, I don't know, I thought they were mostly fair. So this is not a very helpful answer, but I genuinely don't know how you can control this situation from a moderator's perspective. Maybe Igor has a better thought.
I mean, I agree. I think Chris Wallace was limited in what he could do. Obviously, the debate rules did not allow him to cut off somebody's microphone. I think what I found more lacking about Chris Wallace was the fact that he didn't challenge Trump on a lot of points that he was making. And there's a lot of lying, a lot of falsehoods that he was throwing out there about, his healthcare plan, his so-called healthcare plan that we haven't seen and doesn't exist. And especially the Trump's comments about voting and how the election is going to be rigged and about supposed voter fraud. All that went unchallenged. So I think that for me was a bigger issue rather than, was he willing to stop the interruptions?
And on that point, that was actually something that, Chris Wallace kind of came out before the debate, before we knew that Trump was going to be this way. And he said he wasn't going to fact check Trump during the debate. So that was something that was kind of a pre-existing issue going in.
Although he did ask a question about climate change finally.
That is true.
I did not expect the Fox News debate to be the one to do it, but okay, we have the poll results back. Would you like to see more debates before November? 33% of you say yes. 61% of you say no. And then 6% of you say that it doesn't matter. So speaking of it doesn't matter, we've touched on this a little bit. Did this debate matter in the long run for the presidential campaign? Is this going to really change anything? Or do debates just not matter? Was this one just so crazy that it didn't matter?
I think debates can matter, but it's very rare. And one kind of number that is important to remember in 2020 is that there are less undecided voters this time around than there were in 2016. So I think they matter less even now. There's not that many people watching that genuinely don't know who to vote for. And I can't imagine coming in to that debate last night not knowing who to vote for and leaving having learned anything or become more informed about where the two candidates stand.
Yeah, I agree. I would say that it would depend on how you define matter. Like, does it matter in terms of changing the shape of the race right now? No, I don't think Trump needed to do what he needed to do. Biden held his own. In terms of should it matter, and does it matter that Americans get to see this bully on the national stage, on the world stage, berating somebody like this and showing really who he is? I think that matters, and I think that's why there should be more debates, because people should see who their president is.
And so, from now until the election, what are you guys going to be watching for? Like, what will matter and what could change the race, if anything?
I would say that it's still, we have a little over 30 days left. And I believe the 2016 race changed within about a week. The faux announcement by the FBI that there was an investigation into the Clinton emails. So it's still early to tell. Trump has shown a willingness to kind of use all the tools of the presidency to help himself get reelected. So, he's using the Department of Justice to kind of inject themselves into the campaign race with all these reports about voter fraud. He's using his Office of National Intelligence to release all these unredacted, unclassified emails to make Democrats and Joe Biden look worse. There's a lot of things that he could still do. It's a very powerful office.
Yeah, there's two things I'm watching for kind of what are kind of like the late swinging voters in these battleground states doing, like how is the movement there, and then I'm closely watching the court battles, because I think what we're seeing is that already a lot of election day rules are being litigated in the courts. We're seeing, for example, today in Wisconsin, there was another federal appellate ruling on whether mail-in ballots can be accepted after election day. There's litigation in Georgia, there's litigation in Pennsylvania. So there's really just, I think, a lot of mechanical things at stake that could really sway one way or another what happens on election day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's been a lot of talk about, the red mirage. I don't know if you've all have heard that, but, because, so many Republicans are expected to vote in person, those results could come back first, making it look like Trump is winning or will have won. Whereas the mail-in ballots that could be counted later, it could actually be Joe Biden won, but Trump could declare victory, that night, the next day, and just say, it's some sort of conspiracy, the fact that 2 weeks later ends up Biden won. So that's obviously something that we've talked about at HuffPost about how to cover that. We will have live election maps. We don't really want to have a map up that confuses people and makes people think that someone won when the results will change. So as you guys are following results on election night, that's just something to be careful of. Be aware of the rules in each state, because even for mail-in ballots, it's different. Florida counts mail-in ballots early. Other states can't even start counting mail-in ballots until after the polls close, which is obviously going to delay things. As Tara said, there are court cases going on that could determine things. There's a lot of ballots that are going to be challenged. But this election will be unlike any that we've ever had to cover, and it will be a lot harder. Election night, as we know it, isn't really going to be a thing. We're not going to be able to put up a story that night saying who won. So I'm going to want to end it there and take your questions, because I know from doing these in the past that you all always have a lot of great questions. So I will throw it back over to Hillary.
Great, thank you guys. So like I said before, if you've got a question, all you need to do is raise your hand, and you can do that by clicking participants and raise hand. I will unmute you and call you up, and then you can ask your question. And I don't see any hands raised yet, so I will, oh wait, I do. Susan Sherwin, here, I'm going to unmute you, Susan. Susan, you should be unmuted. Can you speak?
Yes. Great. Okay. I know that Biden talked about how approving the Supreme Court nominee would affect insurance and Roe versus Wade and other things. I would have liked him to have said something about the hypocrisy of it, considering that Biden's nominee wouldn't even be voted upon. How do you feel about that?
Igor, do you want to take this one since you've been covering, you will be covering and have been already a lot of the Supreme Court fight on the Hill?
Yeah, I mean, I think Susan makes a great point. There is a huge hypocrisy issue here, and I think she's right. Biden didn't really lean into that. At least he didn't get a chance to at last night's debate. You know, Republicans now say that they're going to move forward with this confirmation during an election year, when in 2016 they said the American people should vote and they should decide, and then after that we're going to move forward with the Supreme Court confirmation. Republicans are now just flat out ignoring that. And they've kind of invented this whole new standard in saying that, you know, when you have a divided government, that's not really the case. What it really comes down to is power politics. You know, Mitch McConnell is the Senate leader. He has the votes, and as long as Republicans have 51 votes, they're going to do whatever they want. And that's the way that Mitch McConnell has cynically changed the game here in Washington, prompting all this talk among Democrats of, well, we've got to, you know, take action now. If we win the Senate and the White House, we might have to eliminate the filibuster. Some people are talking about even changing the makeup of the Supreme Court.
Thank you, Igor. We've got lots of hands raised. So next I'm going to go to Carmen Leon. Carmen, I'm going to unmute you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Good afternoon. My question is, even though one of the people, the young woman who said that she was struggling with the question of the responsibility of Mr. Wallace to maintain order, I strongly believe that it was his responsibility to keep order during the debate. What could we, the people, do to put pressure on the next debate on the moderator?
So I mean, I think that's an interesting question. So in terms of what I meant when I was struggling with that question, because I think Chris Wallace, he at times was raising his voice. He was, I mean, it felt like he was kind of like an elementary school teacher, kind of like wrangling like a screaming child. He was like shouting, "No, stop!" And so that's what I meant when I didn't really know what else he could have done in that moment. In terms of what the people can do to pressure moderators, I mean, I think to Igor's point, I mean, something that maybe more pressure on maybe there could be more pressure to fact check live during the debate. There could be more pressure to speak to different issues that people think are important. As Amanda mentioned, we didn't expect him to touch on climate change. He did. So things like that. But in terms of how he can kind of put a check and control on Trump, I personally just was dumbfounded a little bit on what else he could have done.
I would add too that you can reach out to the next debate moderators. We know who they are. I believe it's Kristen Welker at NBC and Brian Lehrer at C-SPAN. So you can reach out to them, or you can write the Commission of Presidential Debates. See if you can get them to maybe think about changing the rules.
And creating noise online does work. Media personalities are incredibly sensitive to criticism and their public image. I don't think it's a coincidence that people online have made such a stink about climate change and that there finally was a question. I mean, yes, it did take this long. That doesn't mean that if you say that they should fact check they're going to start doing it. But they and their producers and the people putting on these events, they want to put on a successful event that people watch, that gets good reviews. And so they are monitoring. If there is a big outcry on social media over something, that's something they'll pay attention to. So that is one way I think that, you actually can get their attention.
Thank you. We'll go to Burton Pikowski. I'm going to unmute you. Hi, can you speak?
Hi, thank you very much, and thank all of you for this wonderful discussion. Just quickly on the moderator, there's been talk about being able to mute the mic, and I wonder if that's one way. And I understand the next debate there'll be questions from an audience, and there's a suggestion that whoever is asked a question will have a mic that's open and not the other person. So that might help. But I had a question. Several people talked about, some of the things Biden did well, talking to the audience, and some of the things he said, showing his empathy and decency. And Trump, on the other hand, showing, that he's a bully, he's a liar, he's just unfit to be president. I wonder if what you think about whether Biden got any votes yesterday that he previously did not have. Thank you.
Tara, Igor?
I would say the likelihood is strong. There was a couple of post-debate focus groups. Focus groups are, where some of the networks round up a lot of undecided voters, put them on TV and ask them who won after the debate was done. There were some undecided voters, some Trump voters, Trump-leaning voters who said that they didn't like how he did, how Biden had the better night. And so I think that definitely bodes well for Biden. I think that Trump's bullyish behavior, his dominating performance really didn't help him all that much.
Okay, we'll go to the next question. Thanks, Igor. Next up is Julius Adams. Julius, I'm going to, there you go.
Yep, we're here. Hi, question going way forward. We know that the balloting is going to take time to get the results. What do you think the mood on the streets are going to be, considering that statement of stand down but stand by is not getting as much attention I think it deserves? What is he telling people to do, even if, what if the Supreme Court said, you're not the winner, if he does go that far? What do you think he's telling people to do, and what should we be thinking about right now? Or are we going to have mass pandemonium in the streets?
I think this is a really kind of valid scenario to go down. I was covering Senator Bernie Sanders gave a speech last week about kind of Trump's threat to democracy, and he kind of played out this worst case scenario that Trump declares victory before all the ballots are counted, and then the ballots say something, the vote count says something else, and it goes to the courts, and the Supreme Court decides, and there's violence in the street, and his reading was that the way to kind of minimize that is to have this, you have to have a landslide victory for one candidate or the other. But I think it is very valid that is what Trump is signaling, and what he has been signaling, that if he doesn't win, he has repeatedly said that the streets will become violent. And I think the kind of the outrage on the other side as well, if this is unfairly executed, I think that is something worth considering.
Igor, do you have more thoughts?
I agree. I think it's a nightmare scenario. It's the one scenario that keeps everybody up at night right now, both on the right and on the left. I talked to Democrats on Capitol Hill, and they're dejected that they have to win by so many points in order to make this a fair election. Like, which country are we in right now? I think some lawmaker brought up the comparison to Belarus and all the stuff that's going on there right now, all the protests, and making that kind of comparison. So I think it's definitely a scenario that's keeping me up at night.
And what are Democrats, Democratic lawmakers or Democratic groups doing to prepare for something like this?
Democrats have built up a huge legal machine right now, which has been kind of turning in the courts, winning in the courts against the Trump campaign and Republicans who have been trying to deny, ballot counting after the election. So they're hoping that this kind of legal apparatus behemoth that they've built and that has been successful so far will sort of turn into post-election kind of as an insurance policy that when this thing ends up in the courts, which it certainly looks like it might be, given the Republicans are saying that we need this Supreme Court justice, new justice to help us judge the result of the election, that will help them if that is the case.
And we recently had a good piece from one of our reporters, Paul Blumenthal, who outlined a nightmare scenario of what could happen after the election. When there is an election, it's not just whoever has AP declares the winner is the winner. The House has to actually certify it. The states choose electors. And one thing that could happen is that Republicans, who often control state legislatures in some of these key states, they choose their own electors. And then governors, Democratic governors in those same states, choose their own electors. And so you could have these two sets of electors, and then the courts have to determine which set is valid. The Supreme Court, this could get determined there, but if the Supreme Court, say Amy Coney Barrett, for some weird reason, doesn't actually get confirmed, it's a 4-4 tie, or they simply decline to hear it, it's back in the lower courts. The election could hinge on just what regional court gets the case, which is a little disturbing and shocking. And Republicans do have an edge in a lot of these courts because Trump has been so successful at pushing his nominees through. So that's another thing to be watching for.
Yeah, and in terms of another thing that Democrats can do is they can win state legislatures. That's exactly what Nancy Pelosi was urging her members to focus on, not only the election, not only on their reelection, but telling their folks to really try and win these state legislatures because they might be really crucial.
Thanks, guys. Let's go to LaBode. I will unmute you. All right, you're up.
Okay, my question is the debate was a disappointment is an understatement. Now, for future debates, what incentives does Joe Biden has to continue to engage with Donald Trump, who does want to spill out lies and disinformation and then interrupt him? What incentive does he have to engage him in another debate? Are there ways that he can employ in order to overcome its misbehavior from the president? And my second question is, if states begins to choose electors or overthrow the will of the people, what records does the country have?
Tara, Igor?
I could take the first question. It's to Igor's a point Igor made earlier about how it is important to show who the president is and who the candidate challenging the president is. And I think Biden recognizes that. I think he recognizes the opportunity it presents to display in full force what Trump is and who he represents. And interestingly, one of the biggest moments and kind of lines that stood out from last night was when Trump told the Proud Boys and white supremacists to stand by. And that really kind of brought people back to the events that happened in Charlottesville when Trump said there are good people on both sides. That was Biden's entire kind of impetus to run for president. So I think he does recognize that it is what Trump is putting on display does resonate with his overall campaign message. I don't know if Amanda, you want to take the question on electors or?
Sure, yes. The second one, I think that Republicans would argue that, depending on how the results would come out, they will argue that they are representing the will of the people, that the governor isn't. But the recourse is through the courts. And again, that for Democrats in some areas is not necessarily good. because Trump has put so many of his nominees on. And as Igor stated, it is electing Democrats to the state legislatures. And traditionally, Republicans have been more focused on state level politics. And that's why for a long time that they were controlling legislatures and even governorships. But lately, Democrats have been starting to pay more attention there, and they've seen some success. Did you have anything else to add, Igor?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think also it's another reason why the Supreme Court is so huge, so huge. Democrats, for the longest time, Democratic base voters, the Supreme Court wasn't one of their top issues. It didn't animate Democratic voters, and that's why Democratic candidates didn't really talk about it. I think the 2016 election was a big example of that. I think Hillary Clinton should have and could have talked more about the Supreme Court and what was at stake. So I think fighting this current confirmation is one thing that Democrats can do.
And so I want to ask you about the Supreme Court, since we don't have a Supreme Court member chat, and this is such a big topic. What is your sense? Is there anything that Democrats can do to stop Amy Coney Barrett? And what is their strategy going to be? Committee hearing start, I believe, on October 12th.
Yeah, that's right. In a couple of weeks. Democrats right now, when you talk to them, they're pretty pessimistic about their chances of actually stopping this nominee, about blocking her, because Republicans are united. They have 51 members on board. As long as they have 51, they can get her through. What they can do is delay and stall. If they can delay and stall using procedural tactics, some trickery in the hearings, they can perhaps delay it after the election, where it's kind of a tougher push for Republicans in justifying, pushing this confirmation through if Joe Biden wins the election.
Okay, next, I'm going to call up Armand Fontaine. I'm going to unmute you. Here we go. You should be unmuted, but we can't hear you, so I'm not sure if your volume is okay on your side.
Okay, can you hear me now?
There we go, yes.
Okay, no, I hadn't been unmuted yet. That's okay. I've got a comment and a question. My comment is, I am retired Air Force, and I spent the better part of my life, 20 years and 22 days, serving this country against authoritarians, despots. That was my job, protecting us against them. Never in my life did I think I would have to be facing that at home. And it's frightening and it's depressing. But my question is, what legal options does the Park Police have if Trump loses and refuses to leave on the 21st of January? The Park Police, can't the Park Police arrest him for trespassing? Because he's no longer the occupant of the White House. Thank you.
Tara, Igor, I don't know. Have you looked into this? Do you know anything about this?
I can't say I've looked into this.
I don't think that they can do that legally, but I think your question does speak to this issue of what happens if Trump refuses to concede, and if anybody will step up to challenge him. Top Republican senator recently said, John Thune of South Dakota, he's a majority whip here, said that if it was asked if Trump refuses to concede, whether he would rise up and stand up against the president, he said yes. Now, whether that is the case, actually, if that happens, whether the entire Republican Party has kind of like a Nixon moment and goes up to the White House and tells them you've got to go, the track record isn't great on that front. If you look at law enforcement, the leaders of the military, some of the top generals have said that they're not going to wade into political election disputes. So they're also got their hands up and they say, leave us out of it.
And so, I mean, even if Trump loses, I don't think that we are done hearing about Trump or the Trump family. What do you guys expect to see from Trump and from the Trump family if he does lose?
Do you want to take it, or?
What do I expect to see? Well, he's certainly not going to leave. He's still got a Twitter account with massive followers. He's changed the Republican Party. Some old school Republicans believe that this is a storm and it'll pass and they'll go back to the before times. But I don't think so. He's going to be around. He's going to be tweeting. His family is around. If you go to Trump rallies, his supporters yell 46 at Don Jr., who's obviously his son, because they want him to run. Ivanka Trump has been mentioned as possibly taking the mantle and running in 2024. I think that Trump has completed the takeover of the Republican Party. He's going to be here, whether online or on TV. Like the guy, like Joe Biden said, the guy can't shut up.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm. My biggest question too is, I mean, who do Republicans put up as the leader of their party, even if it's not a member of the Trump family? What kind of Republican lawmaker is the heir apparent to a Trump administration? You're not going to have the Paul Ryan Republican again. And I think a lot of those people kind of left the party hoping this would pass and that they could kind of make a resurgence in politics. But it doesn't seem like the base is at all close to them anymore.
Yeah, when I remember when Obama won, Reince Priebus, who was then head of the Republican National Committee, famously did that autopsy report and determined that the demographics of the country were changing and not in Republicans' favor. They were getting more diverse, and that the Republican Party had to become more inclusive. Obviously, it didn't go that way, and Reince Priebus ended up going to work for Trump as his chief of staff. So do you expect the Republican Party to try to have any internal soul searching and to try to take that direction this time if Trump loses, or are they just going to dig in and continue to be, this conspiracy theory QAnon, direction?
Yeah, I mean, I keep kind of going back to how far we are from the kind of the Mitt Romney 2012 autopsy, as you said. Like this is just, it's night and day. I do think if Trump loses in November and Democrats' margin in the House grows bigger, if the best case scenario for Democrats happens where Republicans lose the Senate even, I think they will have no choice but to do some kind of soul searching, because they will have lost all branches of government except for the judicial. So I think they will have no choice but to look at how to regain suburban districts, kind of make an appeal to these people that Trump turned off. But the question is whether or not those candidates can even win primaries anymore in the Republican Party. And so far we've seen that that's not the case.
Yeah, I agree. I think given the choice of, passing a giant tax cut and, getting all these judges in and flipping the balance of the Supreme Court and potentially denying Democrats any sort of chance of passing any legislation for the next God knows how many years, and losing the Senate and the House, I think Republicans will tell you that would be pretty happy with the former. They've gotten pretty much everything they wanted to do right now, except for repealing Obamacare, which they're hoping to do through the courts. And once they get this justice in, that's something they might be able to do there. So I think for right now, there will be soul searching, but they're pretty happy with where they are.
I will say though that if Trump is gone, and obviously, yes, he'll still have a Twitter account. He'll still have an outsized presence in the party. But if he's not in everyday campaigning, if he doesn't have the same powers that the office of the presidency gives him to have this kind of constant presence, if the media does not cover him as much as they do now, if he's not constantly the news cycle, whether some Republicans will kind of have a chance to step away from that. Because I think something that I remember when I was covering the 2018 midterms and you were talking to people like Mike Kaufman, who's a representative from Colorado, a suburban district, who lost his seat ultimately, he was just saying, as long as Trump is president, good luck, because you can't get a news cycle to yourself. You can't make your case for yourself. So I think there is a world in which Trump no longer has this kind of position of power around him in the same way that Republicans can kind of step out of his shadow and make a new case for the party. Whether the party as a whole, the big umbrella, takes on those individual messages, I think is probably less likely.
Yeah, one final point, and we were talking about nightmare scenarios for Democrats. The one nightmare scenario thrown out kind of as sort of a not fully serious, but maybe serious option is that Trump, loses in November and decides to run again in 2024. And then, he's back, and that's it.
We are almost out of time. Also, I have my friend here, my cat, Mr. Spots, was very engaged with this conversation. So thank you. He also watched the debate last night. We had a question come in with registration that I wanted to share as our last question, because it's something we haven't quite, I don't think, hit on yet, which was from Michael Noonan, who wanted to know how post-debate analysis on TV influences voters' perceptions of who won, and sort of what do you think the spin last night, the net effect on voters would be from what we heard from pundits across the broadcast networks and cable?
I mean, I think when you're looking at all of these aspects of a debate, they all have some kind of marginal impact on how voters are perceiving everything, right? So we've said repeatedly through this last hour that these debates, kind of the impact on how voters are going to decide is probably pretty small. But if the entire narrative is that Trump, this was just a massive blunder for Trump, I mean, that obviously makes a difference. It makes a difference for momentum. It makes a difference for fundraising. Last night we saw Biden had one of the biggest fundraising nights he's ever had. Like, those are the things that matter. And in kind of the ways outside of whether or not the arguments that were made or the food fight that was had on the stage can sway voters or not. So I think that kind of spin and that kind of media narrative does make an impact.
I want to ask one quick thing. Looking forward to the next debate, the VP debate with Harris and Pence, which I anticipate will be very, very different based on how different Mike Pence is from Donald Trump. What are you guys going to be watching for? How do you think it'll go? Igor, do you want to go?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to that debate more than the other two presidential debates, just because what a matchup. Two very different people, two very different candidates. Mike Pence, obviously a lot more known than Kamala Harris. I'm sure a lot of hardcore Democrats know who Kamala Harris is, but a lot of regular people don't. So this will really be her first kind of national stage outing. And I'll be looking to see how she takes on Mike Pence, given that she's been one of the sharpest Democratic questioners in the Senate. And that's really going to be a fun debate.
Yeah, I think also something, I remember covering the 2016 vice presidential debate, and Mike Pence, I think, caught a lot of people by surprise, where he has this kind of very cool and calm demeanor, and it worked against Tim Kaine. It was largely seen as Tim Kaine having lost that debate in 2016. So I think it will be an interesting matchup, especially because Kamala Harris is known in the Senate and in Washington among Democrats for being kind of this firebrand questioner.
Great. Anything else, Amanda? Any last comments from you?
No, thank you all for joining us. Tune in for the next debate, and we will have another one of these events afterwards, so we can talk more. We will have different guests, though, but we'll be able to talk more about how Pence and Harris do. And yeah, thank you for supporting the work we do.
Yeah, before everybody goes, just a couple of last announcements. First, thank you, Igor, Tara, and Amanda, for your time today. It was great to be with you and have you here. One more mention about HuffPost membership. If you love the work we're doing, if you love the site, if you love these conversations, please support us as a monthly or annual paid member. You can go to huffpost.com/subscribe. And lastly, we'd love to hear from you about what you thought about today's event. We take your feedback very seriously, and we adjust the way that we do these events based on what you tell us. So please fill out our short survey. It'll take less than 5 minutes to tell us how we did and what future events you'd like to attend. Lizelle will drop the link in the chat now here in Zoom. And if you could take a couple minutes to fill it out now, it would be great. Thank you so much. And we will look forward to seeing you very soon after the vice presidential debate. Take care. Thanks.